All right. So, welcome back. My name is Mark. Don't know if you've seen the last video. It was on Vyve Broadband, VYVE. Oklahoma is one of about half the United States that is serviced by Vyve. And in the last video, I covered a billing issue that, well, the company originally made a mistake on, but then insisted they could not correct the mistake and insisted that I must pay an extra $22 a month, which was the whole point of me thinking of calling about canceling in the first place, because it was getting too expensive, becoming too much for me. Was. So, in the beginning and the last part of the video, I did say that I was not sure. I'm not saying that is definitely fraud. I am saying I wasn't sure, but it could be considered fraud once I brought it to their attention that, well, their company made a mistake. I wasn't supposed to be paying the extra $22. I didn't agree to that. I agreed to $60 plus taxes, whatever, $61.20, that sort of thing. So again, I didn't agree to that. But they would not budge. So, I'm not going to quite go into fraud, the definition of fraud just yet. I mean, you guys can look that up yourself if you like. You can do that if you want. But I am going to read it towards the end, and this won't take long. What I am going to touch on first is when I first got Vyve Broadband. These packages would say, this particular equipment is included. So the modem, whatever router they're using nowadays is the Arrow 6 or Arrow 7. Mine was the Arrow 6, and I think it's currently the Arrow 7. I don't know for sure. Don't quote me on that. But anyway, so it'll say includes what and excludes what. And one of the exclusions that was in this list was a benefit: no activation fee. I don't know if they said no installation fee, even though the stuff's all already installed. They literally had to install nothing to get mine going this last time. So like just over a year ago, I got new service. The equipment was already there. Therefore, there was no installation to do, and therefore, I didn't have to pay installation fee. Still, it said no activation fee, okay? I'm sure you guys are very familiar with internet companies charging $100 or so for the installation fee. The activation fee. Either way, okay. But anyway, so I was like, I called and said, hey, I like this package. I want to go ahead and get it. And they said, okay, let's go ahead and get it going. And we were getting it all set up, and they said, okay, so you need to pay the $100 or is it $99 activation fee. And I said, but it specifically says I don't have to pay that. It says no activation fee. She says, well, it might say that, but you have to pay the activation fee. And I said, but it says, it's a promise. It is in writing, literally right there. Even after checking out, buying the package, it said no activation fee. So why do I have to pay the activation fee? So I told her I agreed to the terms of the package. It said no activation fee, and I'm not going to be paying the activation fee. She said, okay, let me see if I can get someone online. She's like, well, they say you're going to have to pay the activation fee. And at that point, I think I remembered that was another time when I was dealing with something else. I was dealing with something else, and I was actually over at the bank about to go through the drive-through. And so I was like, you know what? I'll deal with this later. I don't have time to deal with this later. I'll call back later. And, anyway, so yeah, I ended up calling back. And again, it was a struggle. Sorry, you have to pay the activation fee. Even though it says no activation fee, you have to pay the activation fee. A company cannot put something in writing saying no activation fee and then charging activation fee. It's $100. I don't have $100. I literally had budgeted for that package at that point. I'd actually been watching these package deals for about a month or month and a half, something like that. It was at the beginning of a month, so I assume it was like a month. Yeah, about a month and a half previous to deciding to call and calling in, and having this fight. And so yeah, I ended up calling back, and they ended up escalating this as an issue. And so one of the higher ups finally called me back, and they're like, okay. We can't really do nothing about that. We can't waive the activation fee. And I was like, but it is in writing, is in the package, no activation fee. And him and I went back and forth for a few minutes. And he's like, you know what? Give me a few minutes. And he put me on hold. And he came back. He's like, okay, we're not going to charge you an activation fee after all. So I actually ended up not having to pay for the activation fee. It shouldn't even been a question in the first place. You put something on there, you abide by it. You made the terms, you agreed to that before the buyer came and bought that package. So you don't get to go back on that. Once you agree to something, I'm like, I agreed to it. I bought it. Anyway, so that's that, okay? Now we're going to move on to the definition of fraud. Again, you don't have to watch this if you don't want to. Go Google it. I'm sure a lot of you guys know the definition, and I technically do too, but we're going to go ahead and read it anyway. I used two different sources. The first one was an Associated Certified Fraud Examiner's website, and the basic definition from them of fraud is any activity that relies on deception to achieve a gain. Any activity that relies on deception to achieve a gain. And then the most popular that you guys would probably use, if it's not ChatGPT or Google AI, would be the Webster Dictionary, Merriam-Webster. And the definition of fraud here is deceiving or misrepresenting. It's to act, express, omit, or conceal to induce someone to part with something of value or to surrender a legal right. I'm not sure if the topic of my first video can be considered fraud, but I do think that if they actually get away with this video's topic of no activation fee, if they get away with charging an activation fee while saying there's no activation fee, I do think that there is a case for fraud there. I feel like this is something that would typically be a class action lawsuit, because there's so many people out there that have probably dealt with this, Anyway, so that's my take on it. We're not quite to 10 minutes, but I hope this was all very, beneficial to you. I didn't tolerate the crap. I'm sick of this crap, Again, so we say higher ups for the big wigs, and I don't know, the smaller people in the company. They're kind. They are helpful. They know what they're talking about. The technicians that come in, the same thing, kind, and they know what they're talking about. But there are a few people in the company that they probably hold these smaller people to these I wouldn't say integrity. It's not integrity to do these sorts of things. But anyway, that's pretty much it. That's my take on it. I wanted to share my experience because I was pretty frustrated about this, and that first part about the no activation fee, that was very frustrating. That I even had to fight it. And there's a term I use, mentally exhausted. Actually, my mom uses that term. I think there's something. Oh, I call it mentally drained. I am mentally drained, or not right now, but this sort of stuff does mentally drain me. Absolutely, just yeah. Anyway, hope this helped you guys. Y'all have a wonderful day.